Hello and welcome to Rights and Recourse, a program that tackles legal and constitutional issues, bringing you information and analysis. My name is Dumila Matez. Remember, you can also be part of our discussion today by tweeting us at Rights and Recourse. Alternatively, email your thoughts to rightsandrecourse@sabc.co.za. In 2015, South African courts had their fair share of high-profile cases, some of which made world headlines in the media for the better part of the year. Despite having been sentenced in 2014, Oscar Pistorius continued to make headlines, first with the parole release delayed by the Minister of Justice and Correctional Services, Minister Michael Masuta, and the appeal by the state at the Supreme Court of Appeal against his culpable homicide conviction. The killing of hip-hop artist Nkululeko Flaba Habedi by his girlfriend, Sindisiwe Manqele, in March drew some of the biggest media coverages in South Africa. Today on Rights and Recourse, we take a look at some of these trials, including the performance of our justice system. We are also taking a look at high-profile international trials, especially around the role of the International Criminal Court in meting out international justice. After having been found guilty of culpable homicide for the murder of his model girlfriend, Riva Steenkamp, and the 5-year sentence, Oscar Pistorius remained the focus of the media, first with his pending release that was delayed by the intervention of the Justice Minister Mike Masuta and the appeal to the Supreme Court of Appeal by the state against his culpable homicide conviction.
In these circumstances, I have no doubt that in firing the fatal shots, the accused must have foreseen, and therefore did foresee, that whoever was behind the toilet door might die, but reconciled himself to that event occurring and gambled with that person's life. This constituted dolus eventualis on his part, and the identity of his victim is irrelevant to his guilt. As a final counter to the state's case, it was argued that although the accused had not acted in private or so-called self-defense, there had in fact been no attack upon him that he had acted to ward off. He had genuinely but erroneously believed that his life was in danger when he fired the fatal shots. As opposed to what is commonly known as self-defense, this is so-called putative private or self-defense. The principles relevant to these two defences were authoritatively dealt with by this court in de Oliveira and were explained by Smallberger JA as follows, I quote, "The test for private defence is objective. Would a reasonable man in the position of the accused have acted in the same way? In putative private defence, it is not lawfulness that is in issue, but culpability. If an accused honestly believes his life or property to be in danger, but objectively viewed they are not, the defensive steps he takes cannot constitute private defence. If in these circumstances he kills someone, his conduct is unlawful. His erroneous belief that his life or property was in danger may well, depending upon the precise circumstances, exclude dolus, in which case liability for the person's death based on intention will also be excluded. At worst for him, he can then be convicted of culpable homicide. On appeal, the unlawfulness of the appellant's conduct was not in issue. Accordingly, the only issue was whether the state had proved beyond all reasonable doubt that the appellant subjectively had the necessary intent to commit the crimes of which he was convicted. In other words, that he did not entertain an honest belief that he was entitled to act in private defence. The immediate difficulty that I have with the accused's reliance upon putative private defence is that when he testified, he stated that he had not intended to shoot the person whom he felt was an intruder. This immediately placed himself beyond the ambit of the defence, although, as I've said, his evidence is so contradictory that one does just not know his true explanation for firing the weapon. His counsel argued that it had to be inferred that he must have viewed whoever was in the toilet as a danger. But as was pointed out in de Oliveira, the defence of putative private defence implies rational but mistaken thought. Even if the accused believed there was someone else in the toilet, his expressed fear that such a person was a danger to his life was not the product of any rational thought. The person concerned was behind a door, and although the accused stated that he had heard a noise which he thought might be caused by the door being opened, it did not open. Thus, not only did he not know who was behind the door, he did not know whether that person in fact constituted any threat to him. In these circumstances, although he may have been anxious, it is inconceivable that a rational person could have believed that he was entitled to fire at this person with a heavy caliber firearm without even taking that most elementary precaution of firing a warning shot, which the accused said he elected not to fire as he thought the ricochet might harm him. This constituted prima facie proof that the accused did not entertain an honest and genuine belief that he was acting lawfully, which was in no way disturbed by his vacillating and untruthful evidence in regard to his state of mind when he fired his weapon. In order to disturb the natural inference that a person intends the probable consequences of his actions, the accused was required to establish at least a factual foundation for his alleged genuine belief of an imminent attack upon him. This the accused did not do. Consequently, although frightened, the accused armed himself to shoot if there was someone in the bathroom. And when there was, he did. In doing so, he must have foreseen, and therefore did foresee, that the person he was firing at behind the door might be fatally injured. Yet he fired without having a rational or genuine fear that his life was in danger. The defence of putative private or self-defence cannot be sustained, and there is no bar to a finding that he acted with dolus eventualis in causing the death of the deceased. In the result, on count 1 in the indictment, the accused ought to have been found guilty of murder on the basis that he had fired the fatal shots with criminal intent in the form of dolus eventualis. As a result of the errors of law referred to, and on a proper appraisal of the facts, he ought to have been convicted not of culpable homicide on that count, but of murder. In the interest of justice, the conviction and the sentence imposed in respect thereof must be set aside, and the conviction substituted with a conviction of the correct offence. Of course, the accused has now served a portion of the sentence imposed upon him in respect of the lesser offence of culpable homicide. But the issue of what would be an appropriate sentence was not debated before this court, quite properly, particularly in the light of the Constitutional Court's judgments in Nobolisa and Bogarts, as the matter must be sent back to the trial court for sentence to be imposed afresh. In doing so, obviously, whatever punishment has already been served by the accused in respect of the incorrect conviction of culpable homicide will be taken into account. Before closing, it is necessary to make a final comment. The trial was conducted in the glare of international attention and the focus of television cameras, which must have added to the inherently heavy rigours that are brought to bear upon trial courts in conducting lengthy and complicated trials. The trial judge conducted the hearing with a degree of dignity and patience that is a credit to the judiciary of this country. The fact that this court has determined that certain mistakes were made should not be seen as an adverse comment upon her competence and ability. The fact is that different judges reach different conclusions, and in the light of an appeal structure, those of the appellate court prevail. But the fact that the appeal has succeeded is not to be regarded as a slight upon the trial judge, who is to be congratulated for the manner in which she conducted the proceedings. I conclude with the following order to be made. 1. The first 2 questions of law reserved are answered in favour of the Director of Public Prosecutions. 2. The accused's conviction and sentence on count 1 are set aside and replaced with the following. Guilty of murder, with the accused having had criminal intent in the form of dolus eventualis. 3. The matter is referred back to the trial court to consider an appropriate sentence afresh in the light of the comments in this judgment.
Joining us to discuss the stories, especially the Oscar Pistorius story that made headlines in 2015, we are joined in the studio by our SABC reporters who have been working on some of the stories, Mr. Mangowa Mkhunu and Ms. Griselda Lewis. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Welcome to Rights and Recourse.
Thank you very much.
How is it covering a case of this magnitude?
Well, absolutely daunting. I think starting from the fact that we're looking at somebody of the caliber of Oscar Pistorius, somebody who's captured headlines, who's been through so much adversity, and having been through all of that adversity, somebody who went to put South Africa on the map, had always been admired globally. So when Oscar Pistorius shot and killed his girlfriend on that morning, everybody was surprised, and it certainly hogged local and international headlines.
Were we surprised by the media interest in the story, especially international media, Mangoba?
Not at all, considering the fact that Oscar Pistorius was a well-known athlete, and that certainly he had given a lot of hope to those who are disabled as somebody who made it, who managed to make it despite his disability. So it was not surprising at all to see that world interest on Oscar Pistorius, especially from those outside the country who seem to have looked at Oscar Pistorius as a golden boy and as really a beacon of hope for many people across the world, not South Africa alone. So certainly it does show the interest that Oscar Pistorius had managed to pull in that short space of time in his career.
Griselda, having been involved in the coverage of this story, you probably were not surprised by the many legal experts who were eager to give their expertise.
Oh, no, certainly. I think this, first of all, had all the traits of a perfect Hollywood script. You've got fame, you've got sex, you've got a number of issues that would make the perfect Hollywood script. But, you know, if all those wanted to give legal opinion on it, certainly, you know, it was not just the individuals in all of these cases, including the Flubber case. It was also South Africa's justice system that was on trial here. This was the first time that we saw a trial of this magnitude being broadcast live for everybody to see and to hear. There were some terms that were confusing to many people in South Africa. Everybody wanted to know what dolus eventualis meant. So many terms, which was fantastic, I think, for South Africa, because it's never happened before. It's never happened before. And also the legal experts who would give analysis on that as well was exceptionally educational for ordinary South Africans who've never been able to get a front seat to justice, if I may. It's always been us as journalists who've been in the front rows of those galleries, in those courts, but for ordinary South Africans it was certainly an eye-opener. And essentially for South Africans to see justice unfold.
The important thing, Griselda mentioned the fact that there were many new terms that came out, like dolus eventualis, dolus directus, and dolus, a whole dolus thing going on. There was also the putative private defense.
Yes.
Certainly, I would say that we certainly, as journalists as well, we learned a lot from the courts in terms of how the criminal courts work in this country. I mean, we got to understand what dolus eventualis is, and certainly it created a lot of interest among South Africans who were also trying to find out what is this dolus that they're speaking about. So certainly it was an eye-opener for many people, and it really shows the way that our justice system works, and that if indeed there is an error or a question of error, that this matter can then be taken to another court. It shows that it does make provisions for error to happen, and also for all those errors to then be verified by a different court.
Griselda, the other thing for me is you mentioned the fact that it was an international spectacle. All the cameras of the world were in South Africa, and you actually said our justice system was on trial. Did you come through that with flying colours?
I think it was very important for South Africa, I mean, having one of the most liberal constitutions in the world, it was very important for South Africa to showcase, because there'd been so much criticism. You must recall, Dumile, that from the very beginning, South Africa's jails came under fire, whether they were going to be able to house somebody, the likes of Oscar Pistorius. How many people are jailed in South Africa's prisons. Then from that, there was a situation regarding whether South Africa was going to be able to deal with the case of this nature. So in particular, from an international perspective, it was very important for South Africa to demonstrate that it was able to put through justice, to mete out justice, irrespective of who the person was. It was very important for justice to be seen to be done, and that I guess the notion that people often say that money can buy you freedom in South Africa is certainly something that was dealt with in South Africa. I mean, if we look at, we cannot shy away from the fact that South Africa certainly does have one of the most violent crimes, the violent nature of crimes in South Africa. So for South Africa to demonstrate through its courts, through the justice system, that irrespective of who was on trial, that money does not buy you freedom, was very important of a message to put out there, both for South Africans who certainly felt that way, and also for the international community.
The symbolism of having a woman judge for this trial, how did that pan out?
Oh, that's certainly came under the spotlight. It certainly did. It was quite astounding how, when we knew that Judge Thokozile Masipa would preside over the trial, when we found out, she immediately came under the spotlight. Everybody was watching. Everybody wanted to know who she was, what her qualifications were. It was almost preposterous, I would say. Instead of focusing on, I guess, the happenings inside of court. But I guess we saw issues such as that relating to one of the most famous trials as well, the O.J. Simpson trial. They certainly made reference to that with the Oscar Pistorius, comparisons between the two. So Judge Thokozile Masipa certainly came under intense scrutiny, and also, if I could just add to that, at the time as well when it was found that she did make errors in law, when we went to the Bloemfontein Supreme Court of Appeal, then again it was all daggers out, if I may, for Judge Thokozile Masipa.
The Americans, Mangoba, actually really were surprised by the way our trials are run without a jury system, and they actually thought if there was a jury system, Oscar would have walked.
Interestingly enough, but that's the beauty of our court systems, that they differ in the way that they carry out justice, and certainly that whole process of the Oscar trial going into appeal, and then we see again the defense saying that they're going to take it further, really shows our justice system in the way it works.
Crescenda, when you think the trial is over, the trial comes a full circle again.
Oh, certainly. We're headed to the Constitutional Court, it seems. Oscar Pistorius believes. The only issue, I guess, that the defense would need to raise, which will be very interesting to see when they do file those papers at the Constitutional Court, on what basis they're bringing this issue, because certainly a constitutional matter needs to be raised. Does Oscar Pistorius believe that his rights were trampled on? Does he believe that he did not get a fair trial? And certainly this would be the last hurdle of this particular matter. He certainly has failed at the Bloemfontein Supreme Court of Appeal, going to the Constitutional Court. Now, it'll be very interesting to see what his lawyers bring across. Number one, very importantly, you would recall, of course, when Justice Leach was handing down his judgment, he did indicate that this was a trial of Shakespearean proportions. You've never seen something being broadcast. Absolutely. You've never seen this something broadcast on live television this way. So whether the defense will use that to indicate that perhaps none of the witnesses or some of the witnesses were influenced as a result of what they saw on television certainly remains to be seen. It's not the end for Oscar Pistorius.
The Pretorius defense team indicated that they are going to appeal the Supreme Court of Appeal decision that he be sentenced based on a murder of guilty verdict rather than the initial culpable homicide. He has been released on a 10,000 rand bail and stringent bail conditions, including under house arrest and having to wear an electronic tag. He is expected to be back in court on April the 18th, 2016, when he is expected to be re-sentenced by Judge Thokozile Masipa, but only if his constitutional court appeal is not due. If you would like to join us in today's discussion, you can tweet us at Rights to Recourse or email us at rightstorecourse@sabc.co.za. Stay with us.
In the unfortunate event of death, the last thing your family should have to worry about is money.
That is why all clientele funeral plans pay out within 24 hours.
Plus, we will send 200 Rand free airtime to help with the necessary funeral arrangements.
I'm very proud to have given my cousin a decent funeral, because that is very important in our culture.
Clientele funeral plans are affordable. They start from just 99 Rand per month.
It's easy to apply. No medical examinations, no paperwork. It includes an unveiling and a grocery benefit.
Important. You can cover up to 13 people on one plan.
And on our Ultimate Dignity plan, you can get all your premiums back. Yes, all your money back on top of your cover amount.
I'm
very grateful to clientele.
SMS funeral to 47025.
The internet has been found to be a tool used by militant groups when recruiting members. This has forced governments to create tighter internet laws. Technology has also been used to call for social change, as was the case with the abducted Nigerian girls.
The people on social media are some of the society's most influential. If they get an issue started, you're likely to have that issue become a national issue.
And on Network, we tell you about this serious side of technology, but we have fun too with gadgets, games and cars. That's Network every Sunday at 19:30, only on SABC News.
Welcome back. In another high-profile trial in March of this year, South Africa woke up to the news that Nguleko Flaba Habedi, a well-known hip-hop artist with the band Squatter Camp, has been stabbed to death by his girlfriend Sindisiwe Manqele. Manqele was found guilty of murder at the South Gauteng High Court sitting in Randburg.
Sindisiwe Manqele has been found guilty of murder of her boyfriend Nguleko Flaba Habedi in March this year. Acting Judge Soli Sithole delivered the verdict at the High Court sitting in Randburg. Sithole found that Manqele's intention to stab could not be contended as she admitted at the stand that she intentionally took the knife to Habedi's chest. The court rejected her version of events as improbable.
Judgment in case number 052/2015, that is in the matter between the state versus Sindisiwe Precious Manqele, follows. It is hereby mentioned at the outset that this is a very lengthy judgment. It covers over 50 pages, A4 pages, and please bear with me as I go through this judgment. There is no reasonable relationship between the deceased's alleged attack and the defensive action of the accused. There is no relationship. Stated otherwise, the court finds that the accused, in her private defense, which is the basis of her plea, exceeded the limits of or bounds of such defense by plunging the steak knife into the chest of the deceased, thus intentionally and unlawfully killing him. This lends credence to the evidence of the forensic pathologist Dr. Thandi Mahuluhulu that the nature of the force used for the type of injury sustained by the deceased was consistent with considerable force, which fractured the left fourth rib and penetrated the pericardial sac and right ventricles in the heart of the deceased. This unlawful act of the accused was accompanied by an express intention which is even recorded in the court's record. It follows that private defense cannot avail the accused. Also, she has exceeded its limit, as she had exceeded its limits, and I also find that the state has proved its case beyond reasonable doubt. In the result, I make the following order. The accused is hereby found guilty of the murder of Mr. Habedi as charged.
Manqele has been granted bail. However, Judge Sithole has set strict conditions, including enforcing electronic monitoring for her.
I have mentioned 3 further conditions. The extra 5,000 rand and the fact that she must not leave her residential address without the permission of the investigating officer or without informing the investigating officer, and then she must use a monitoring tag to ensure that she is definitely coming for sentencing on those days. And I want to believe that you understand the conditions, the 3 further conditions which I've added to your initial conditions. The question of reporting to the Midrand police station still has to be done on Mondays and Fridays before 6 o'clock, ne? Not Wednesday, but Monday and Fridays, right? Yeah. So you are hereby granted bail of 15,000 rand, and with those conditions attached to your bail.
Flaba's family said they were not bitter about Manxele being granted bail, as justice has been served and they are looking forward to the sentencing.
I just felt relieved. I just felt relieved that my boy has been vilified. That's it.
Yeah,
that's it.
And as a family, do you believe that you can now move forward with your lives?
Oh yes, definitely.
We can actually start healing, man.
We can start healing.
Morning.
It's been a rough road.
Manxele will face sentencing on 9 March, exactly a year after she killed Habedi. Bali Matikwa for Right and Recourse.
Well, Griselda, this trial was another Romeo and Juliet trial.
Absolutely. Absolutely, Romeo and Juliet again. Allegations of abuse, allegations that Sindisiwe Manxele had suffered at the hands of Nkululeko Flaba Habedi, and everyone not knowing what happened in the beginning. Certainly that had to go to trial again. One of those scripts that you look at where you involved Squatter Camp was extremely successful in South Africa. So you've got that again with the girlfriend. One of the cases certainly that struck the attention of many in South Africa, and I think again with the findings of the court finding Sindisiwe Manxele guilty of murder, another demonstration, I think, that it sends a clear message in terms of what one should do. Educational again. If you find yourself in a particular situation, the last resort should be, I guess, the last line of defense but nobody has the right. One of the main questions, again, that were asked similarly in the Oscar Pistorius trial, what gives the one right to use...
To take a life.
That's right.
One of the issues for Sindisiwe Manxele, to give it all up, she's studying economics apparently in Ireland, and a person of that caliber, would you expect to know what is right and what is wrong?
Certainly, it does show really the circumstances in which, she found herself in. At that night. We don't know what really happened at that night, but another interesting fact is that Sindisiwe Manxele's father is also a former police officer, and therefore you expect somebody who's born by a former cop to know the law better. So it took an interesting twist in the end that she ended up resorting to stabbing Flaba.
Yes.
And so certainly what happened that night we don't know.
It's still a mystery.
It's still a mystery.
The other thing. Griselda, many people were comparing this case with the Oscar Pistorius case. After the sentencing, immediately when the judge said the bail falls off,
that's right,
you must go to the cells down in jail and slip over for the night. But that did not happen with Oscar.
But that certainly set a precedent, because I recall as well the presiding magistrate in the matter, in the Flaba Habedi matter, also made reference to that, saying that this is not the Oscar Pistorius trial. It seems like even those who were representing the state kind of believed that the similar issues that had applied in the Oscar Pistorius matter should also apply in this particular case. So a lot of references, yes, being made, also pertaining to the issues of strict bail conditions that we saw come up. It's a lot in terms of the educational perspective on the part of South Africans, because it was unprecedented, even in the Oscar Pistorius matter, that we saw Oscar Pistorius continuing to go back under house arrest, the bail conditions that were made so stringent, including the electronic tag, the fact that he's not allowed to be 20 kilometers away from his uncle's home. So a lot of that, I guess, raising a number of eyebrows, but also giving clarity on where exactly the law stands in terms of serious offences that are committed.
And it certainly will be interesting going forward to see, how other cases handle this going forward. If, we'll see a change in this, or if they certainly use this particular trial and the Sinisiwe Manqele trial also to fight for similar, grounds.
Also, lawyers in South Africa today should also prepare themselves for the camera spotlight.
Oh, absolutely. I think there was a lot of pressure there. And we saw a lot of the theatrics, many would say. But it was very interesting to watch, certainly. But that's what happens inside the courtroom. That's what many South Africans, I guess, don't understand. That's what happens. As we sit there, here in, here out, those are exactly the theatrics that we see inside. But certainly very surprising to South Africans.
This former Ireland-based economist student Sinisiwe Manqele was released on bail, on a 15,000 rand bail, pending a sentencing in March of 2016. If you'd like to join us in today's discussion, please tweet us at Rights Recourse or email out your thoughts to rightsandrecourse@sabc.co.za. Stay with us.
SABC News. We report, contextualize and present news and current affairs honestly, fairly and fully. We consider it a duty to provide consistent, relevant, useful and top quality information and analysis. Our mission is to provide credible, accurate and interesting news programming, bringing news into everyone's homes in everyone's languages. Thank you, South Africa, for relying on SABC News for quality news output and for making us your #1 source of information. SABC News, Africa's news leader.
Preparing for victory requires intense effort and teamwork. When you get to it, there is no turning back, because all eyes are on you. When it's action time, nothing should stand in your way. Sports Live tackles and analyzes all the sport action. This is the home of all your sport news, updates and more. Sports Live weekdays at 8:30 p.m.
As stories are broken around the world, SABC makes sure you do not miss out. As the stories unfold throughout the day, News at 8 updates all newsworthy stories worldwide. Globally, we are there. Locally, we leave no story untold. Make a date with News at 8 every Saturday and Sunday on SABC News, Africa's news leader.
It's that time of the year again where good friends and families come together to celebrate with love. It's Christmas time. Christmas time. It's Christmas time. From the SABC News family to yours. Have a very Merry Christmas and a prosperous New Year.
Welcome back. South Africa has also seen some of its law enforcers, 8 policemen, being hauled before the North Gauteng High Court in Pretoria for the murder of Mozambican taxi driver Mido Masia. In a verdict that clearly stunned many of the former policemen's family members, Judge Berbam convicted Mishek Malele, Thamsanqa Ngema, Percy Nisi, Bongumusa Mdluli, Sipho Ngobeni, Lungisa Gwababa, Bongani, Kolisi and Linda Sololo of murder. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we even though we're not mentioning it in the introduction, there was a lot of emphasis or spotlight on police brutality and also the killing of policemen this year.
certainly did raise those issues. As you'll know, that a lot of policemen were targeted this year. And what it did do really is to really put that question to say then that, at what is the suitable force that police can use? It certainly did, put the spotlight on the police in terms of how they work and how they respond to crime, and certainly questions around their use of force. So certainly it did raise a lot of those issues with regards to the way police work and the way that they're perceived by the communities which they serve. If they're brutal, you know that they always seem to be on the wrong side of the law. But again, if they're being targeted and killed, what then do they do? So we saw police really being caught between a rock and a hard place.
Griselda, many people attribute this issue of police brutality to the militarization of the police.
Well, one of the questions that we've really focused on in 2015 is to try and find out from those who head the South African police, what is it the issue relating to training, perhaps, of South Africa? Because no one shies away from the fact that Mido Marcia had been parked in a particular spot obstructing traffic, but the manner in which police are supposed to handle themselves is really something that needs to I think the South African Police Service needs a holistic approach to dealing with these issues within the South African Police Service. How do you handle yourself if you're faced with an issue where, for example, a taxi driver stops and he does not want to obey the rules and the regulations of the road? Of course, that is inexcusable that we see the kind of visuals that we saw that shocked the world, certainly in terms of Mido Marcia. But one of the key issues, I guess, is getting some kind of answer from the South African Police Service. We're not able to get clarity at this point on moving forward how those who head the South African Police Service are going to change this attitude. So many police officers have been killed during the year of 2015. What are these challenges? And strangely, you would find, Dumile, is that a majority of these are off-duty police officers. So it clearly seems like there is an onslaught against police officers in this country. You'd find a situation where are criminals outnumbering police officers? We're very vigilant during this time as well, during the festive season, where police are out in full force on the streets to ensure that criminal elements don't ruin it for everyone. But, I think very importantly to raise issues with the South African Police Service on what the steps are moving forward regarding the South African Police Service, because clearly there is an element that is wrong somewhere.
We saw this with the Andries Tatane issue a few years ago, and we saw this recently in Krugersdorp too.
Well, certainly, and that certainly put this particular case on the spotlight, especially from the side of the families who were saying that in the Andries Tatane case, justice did not seem to have been done. It seems that, in that particular case, the police, the evidence that was there showed that the police did not act wrongly. So that's another issue that the families raised, to say that, what makes this particular case different? And saying that they are being targeted. They are clearly being targeted by the state.
But many of these arms that are, some of them, police have lost a number of arms, especially off duty, a number of their own arms.
It's one of the very important questions, I think, Dumile, which needs to be raised. It's about where these criminals are getting these firearms from. Look, there's a lot of speculation regarding that at this point. But, certainly one of, according to the Institute for Security Studies, one of the issues, I guess, that criminals want to get their hands on is these firearms. You'd find that some of these firearms have been within the South African Police Service. A police officer disarmed several years ago, but we're not saying all of them. Serious investigation, I guess, needs to be done about these arms and where exactly.
To what extent does the leadership, the instability in the leadership of the police contribute to this?
Well, certainly, you can say that in a certain way it does. As you know that, a place without proper leadership, there will always be problems there. So certainly the drama that we've seen around the leadership, of Ria Pierre, the suspensions, and, the major problems that have plagued the police service have really put that particular service, into question. And certainly one would hope that, when there's proper leadership and proper leaders that will guide the service, then we'll have some sort of a direction as to how the police service, aims to improve their services and how they maintain to deal with the service going forward.
But it also seems like a festering sore, because this is not the first time this has happened with Ria Piega. We've seen a string of police commissioners who've not run full course when it comes to their appointments, and allegations of corruption, allegations of purging, what we're seeing within the South African Police Service at the moment. So definitely, it's one of the major contributing factors, and I think in order for the police to gain some kind of stability, that certainly needs to happen at the top.
What is the role of the communities that amongst which the police are working?
Well, certainly communities need to play their part. I mean, crime is not just an issue affecting police. It's something that we should all be involved in to try and fight. We know that the police also cannot do it without the communities out there. So therefore, they play a critical role in the fight against crime. And certainly, we've seen, the relationships improving at some, areas, and some areas still have a lot of work to do with regards to that. I mean, you'll find that people still don't have confidence in the police, knowing that there's issues of fraud, there's issues that, when people open cases, police, they see again those suspects that were arrested, released within a few days. So there's still a lot of issues of mistrust between the communities and police, which really have to be tackled going forward in order to improve and to really make that fight against crime a successful one.
We had the acting Commissioner of Police here a couple of months ago on rights and recourse, and he promised they are going to go back to basics. But unfortunately, it is said the whole justice cluster has to look at some of these issues.
No, certainly. I think just starting with the issue of communities and the police. Do communities trust police officers? It's one of the pertinent questions that I think needs to be answered. That relationship has fractured seriously over the years, and if they're going to go back to basics, the basics need to start in those communities, because take for example, you cannot have a police officer in every single community in South Africa. So you've got to have communities who are in the front line, or for example, look to your next door neighbor and realize that something is happening next door that should not be happening. Pick up the phone and call a police officer, alert them to what's happening in our community. So until that relationship itself, the back to basics, if back to basics is going to succeed, it needs to start with the communities themselves. They're the first point of getting to any crime scene for that particular matter. They know more of what's happening in those communities. So the relationship building between these communities and the South African Police Service needs something like a bandage as soon as possible.
Well, all of these things will have to be done, looked at in the next year, 2016. Mangoba Mkulu and Griselda Lewis will leave us now. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your time and your input into this program for our last program in 2015, and probably we'll talk many with you guys to look at these issues in the coming year. The policemen were all sentenced to 15 years in jail, but one of them, Walter McClough, was found not guilty and released, even though the families indicated that they would appeal the conviction. That has not materialized thus far. If you'd like to join us in today's discussion, please tweet us at Rights Recourse or email your thoughts to rightsandrecourse@sabc.co.za. Stay with us.
Morning Live sets the agenda for the day. We bring you the latest local and international news. We are on the ball with all your sports activities and results. We give you the latest business update.
We bring you the latest weather every time.
Watch Morning Live every weekday morning at 6 o'clock, bringing you everything you need to know before you go. Shap shap, tada.
News Today takes an in-depth look on news locally continentally and globally. We bring the world to your home. We cover all economy news extensively to keep you informed. We are live to break news as and when they happen across the world. We analyze news using experts in all aspects. Make a date with News Today every Monday to Friday from 3 to 5:30 p.m.
On July 20th, 2015, former Chadian dictator Hissène Habré went on trial on charges of crimes against humanity, war crimes and torture before the extraordinary African chambers in the Senegalese courts. The trial is the first in the world in which the courts of one country prosecute the former ruler of another for alleged human rights crimes. The advent of the trial, 25 years after Habré was overthrown and fled to Senegal, is entirely due to the perseverance and tenacity of Habré's victims.
We first began this case 16 years ago. One of the victims asked us, "Since when has justice come all the way to Chad?"
Comment Hissène Habré va nier qu'il n'a pas tué des gens? La 404 jaune bâchée, ça servait à quoi? À amener de la viande? Moi j'étais là, si on t'appelle entre 1h du matin jusqu'à 3h30, c'est pour l'exécution. Mais si c'est après 3h30, c'est pour les tortures.
Moi, quand mon mari était arrêté, personne n'est venu me rendre visite. Même dans la rue, je dis bonjour, ils fuient, ils ne veulent pas se rapprocher de moi. Parce que dès qu'ils vont rapprocher, ils vont dire, ah, ils vont venir peut-être me dire les nouvelles. Ils seront arrêtés.
Hissène Habré was the dictator of Chad from 1982 to 1990. He's accused of thousands of political killings and systematic torture.
Après lui, il régnait comme un dieu. Pour lui, tout ce qui bouge vient contre son pouvoir. Celui qui ose, Habré est un lion, il va le dévorer.
The Documentation and Security Directorate, the DDS, was like Hissène Habré's personal Gestapo.
La DDS pouvait fusiller quelqu'un, et la DDS pouvait égorger quelqu'un, la DDS pouvait enterrer quelqu'un vivant, mais la DDS était permis à faire tout.
Souleymane Gengeng spent almost 3 years in Hissène Habré's prisons, and he saw dozens of prisoners die around him. He swore to God that if he ever survived, that he would devote his life to the pursuit of justice. When they were released from prison, Souleymane and other victims interviewed hundreds of survivors and relatives and prepared their files. And it was these files that were the basis for the first indictment of Hissène Habré in Senegal in 2000. I was in Chad with my colleague Olivier Berco in 2001, and we went to the abandoned offices of the DDS. And there we stumbled on rooms and rooms of documents. Lists of prisoners who died every day, spying reports, interrogation files. This was a roadmap to how Hissène Habré carried out the repression of his people. Human Rights Watch has been working with Habré's victims for 16 years. It's because of the perseverance of the victims who never gave up that Hissène Habré is going to trial. We have hundreds of victims' testimonies. We have the documents of the DDS that corroborate those testimonies. And then we have the testimony of the people around Hissan Habre who describe how Habre's orders were carried out.
Je disais toujours aux gens que nous, en tant que survivants de torture, il nous manque quelque chose. De tout ce qu'on a vécu, vraiment, il n'y a que cette justice qui devait nous donner la vraie guérison psychologique. Hein? Parce que pour quelqu'un qui n'a pas vécu cette prison, qui n'a pas vécu ces tortures, ne peut pas les comprendre.
When I met Suleiman Gengeng for the first time, people thought he was crazy to pursue justice against the dictator. This trial could be historic for Chad and for Africa to show that ordinary victims, through perseverance and tenacity, can bring a dictator to justice.
That insert courtesy of Human Rights Watch. This trial in Senegal was postponed. However, there is hope that Africa will bring those leaders who rule their people with impunity to book. This is especially so for the people of Chad. If you'd like to join us on today's discussion, please tweet us at Recourse or email your thoughts to writeandrecourse@sabc.co.za. We'll be back after the break.
Media Monitor, your weekly media news review program.
It was squashed some few months back, but obviously this is something that is going to hang around Praveen until it is actually dealt with. If he didn't know, then he wasn't doing his job.
In it, she described how the man's hair was frozen, although the man has no hair.
Is anybody volunteering to go to jail for him? That is not how the law works.
This particular matter makes us really look like a serious banana republic.
Unpacking headlines and giving analysis on topical issues. Sundays at 9 a.m. only on the SABC News Channel.
AKA went overseas to win 2 awards for himself for Best South African Male Artist and a second one for his hit track All Eyes on Me. The Lamb film is nominated for Best Foreign category at the 2016 Oscars.
We couldn't find finance until the script won a very prestigious prize in France.
Dr. Pascal has inspired many in song and theatre presentation.
In 1985 when I came, I went to the SABC on the radio and I was the voice of Africa.
Catch Trends every Friday at 9 p.m.
Health Talk, your show on health practice.
The people being empowered with knowledge so that they can change their behavior and reduce their risk of being sick.
How serious is stress at work?
If we don't address workplace stress, that negative stress, then it can lead to burnout and it can lead to depression.
How does absentees affect companies?
The one that's really problematic for employers is the one that is unscheduled.
How can companies organize their wellness program?
Health promotion mustn't just be a one-size-fits-all type of approach. It must be customized based on understanding of the unique needs of that particular organization.
For health tips that will help you to adopt healthy living with Dr. Sillo Mutawung on Health Talk every Saturday.
In other cases on the international front, the dispute between the African Union and the International Criminal Court with regard to the trial of Kenyan Deputy President William Ruto and the pending trial of President Uhuru Kenyatta for crimes against humanity is still bubbling along. And the intended arrest in South Africa of Sudanese President Omar al-Bashir threatened the very existence of the International Criminal Court and a stern test for both the rule of law in South Africa and the international jurisprudence. This led to South Africa and Kenya threatening to pull out of the Rome Statute signed to deal with crimes against humanity. At the Assembly of State Parties at The Hague, that are countries that are signatories to the Rome Statute, South Africa and Kenya used this platform to voice their dissatisfaction with the ICC. It would, however, seem that both Kenya and South Africa have toned down their rhetoric, but it remains to be seen what the way forward is going to be, as the withdrawal from the ICC does not necessarily absolve state parties of their responsibility. This program is repeated at 5 on Monday morning. Do find us on Twitter and YouTube. From all of us here in the studio and the rest of the team, we hope you had a very nice Christmas and we wish you a happy new year. Goodbye.